Hello, and welcome to Mr. America, the Bearded Truth, covering political and social issues one liberty at a time, with entertaining insights of current events and important discussions on topics that affect us all, shining the torch of liberty and brightening the future by bringing libertarianism into our everyday life. And now, your host, the friendly neighborhood libertarian, Jason Lyon, Mr. America, the Bearded Truth on Muddied Waters Media.
Oh, boys and girls, we are back. Friday night special episode with me, Mr. America, the Bearded Truth. Who would have thought? Who would have guessed? Well, here we are. I'm so excited to be here. I hope you guys are as well. I've got one hell of a show lined up for you guys tonight because the whole nation's talking about it. Abortions. Is it right? Is it wrong? Should we legislate on it? How do we move forward as a nation? And what should the culture look like? Well, of course, we've got some libertarian answers for you, which means that it doesn't fit neatly into the pro-choice, doesn't fit neatly into the pro-life side of things. But I'm so excited to sit down with the Libertarian Party candidate for governor of Oklahoma, Natalie Bruno, tonight. It's going to be an incredible show. You're not going to want to miss this. So thank you, of course, to everyone for joining in and for tuning in, for sharing this out, for liking it, for dropping your comments. I see you, Mercy. Thank you guys so much for being here. So, special episode. I'm excited. Hope you guys are. But I want to give first a big thanks to Matt and Spike for continuing to give me a platform to come out here, talk to you guys, and give you guys my views and everything else, as well as being able to let me use amazing people like Natalie Bruno to come talk with. Thank you to Brian Scott Lambrick and Jenny for the intro that we use on every episode of Mr. America, the Bearded Truth. And of course, thank you guys. Whether you guys are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Float, Odyssey. I said Float. All right. If you're on any of those watching the stream live, thank you so much for that. If you guys are listening to this after the fact on the podcast, thank you so much for that. Of course, if you guys want to lean in and you guys want to help out the Muddied team, you can head on over to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters/subscribe. And by doing so, what you'll be doing is you'll be getting exclusive content. All of these episodes, instead of just having to listen to the podcast, you'll be able to open up on Spotify. You'll be able to watch these podcasts on your phone, wherever you go, whatever time. So you don't have to go into Facebook or YouTube and give us views there. You could do this from your Spotify app. You'll be able to see those videos. Every episode is going to be on video format. You'll also be getting the other exclusive content, such as Muddied America. If you haven't seen those episodes, it's always fantastic with me and Matt sitting down. You'll also be a part of the Muddied Zoom. So once a month, you'll be able to sit down with Spike Cohen, Matt Wright, and myself when I can get on there and hang out for an hour on a Zoom call. Always a good time. Always worth the couple lattes that cost a month. So head on over to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters/subscribe to get in on that. And of course, big thank you to Kelsey Lyon Designs, this is somebody who I will love and adore for the rest of my days. Not just for who she is, but also for the work that she's done. And she has worked on so many different campaigns for different events in different markets. She will revolutionize the way that you look. She will help you with your logos, your branding, your business cards, your publications, whatever it is and your graphic designs needs. Kelsey Lyon will take care of you. So head on over to kelseylyondesigns.com, use the code Muddied Waters, and she'll give you a nice discount. Also, big thank you to Nug of Knowledge. If you guys are looking to get a little knowledge, get a little nug, and have a little love, head on over to nugofknowledge.com, use the code Bearded Truth, and you'll be able to get 10% off. You will love what you get, I guarantee it. And I want to just thank each and every one of you guys once again, but if you guys wouldn't mind, help me welcome on the one and only, the amazing Libertarian Party's candidate for governor in Oklahoma, Natalie Bruno. Natalie, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So, special episode, we get to sit down and we get to talk about the thing that nobody likes talking about. Everyone likes to scream, yell, and shout at each other. But just from our pre-show, I know that things are gonna go quite well. I'm so excited for today's conversation. But before we get into that, I want to know, Natalie, what's been going on over there in Oklahoma for your campaign? How's everything been going? And then we can dive in a little bit to what's going on there first before we get into the national stuff.
Yeah, well, every time I'm on your show and I see your plug-in for your wife, I always feel like I have to also mention that Kelsey is amazing and also did my logo and stuff as well. So in honor of her, my background today is actually a stamp and repeat she did for a banner of mine that I use at my tabling events and stuff like that. So Kelsey is really fantastic. Outside of that, my race has been going fantastic. We just finished filing season in April. So we finally have official candidates on the roster, so to speak. So I was lucky that I had the entire support of the Libertarian Party of Oklahoma and every other candidate. So I'm not primaried. I get to go straight through to the general election on November 8th, but we will have primaries for the Democrats and the Republicans. It's shaking up to be a really interesting race, not only just because of our dynamic here in Oklahoma, but everything that's been going on. Obviously everybody's talking about the leaked information about the overturn of Roe versus Wade, but here in Oklahoma, we've had two pieces of legislation over the last several weeks, one earlier this week and one last month that had to do with abortion as well. And so it's been shaking things really interesting for my campaign because of the fact that even though I personally am pro-choice, pro-life, I believe in pro-choice when it comes to keeping the government out of those decisions. And based on how things are going with the other candidates, so typically this is a strong Democratic stance, but the Democrat that is looking to win that seat, Joy Hoffmeister, she actually was a flipped Republican that said she was only running as a Democrat because the incumbent has taken over the party. And even though right now she's pretty much saying the same thing as me, which is I'm pro-life, but I'm letting other people make decisions, that's actually completely contradictory to a lot of statements she put out when she was running as a Republican. So it looks like I might be the only women's right and anti-government out of women's health candidate that's going to be on the general election ballot in November. So it's shaking up to be really interesting. I'll say that.
So are you saying that potentially this leaker of the Roe versus Wade was just there to help you in your campaign? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, like as horrible as it is, it is kind of almost shaking up to be that way because we know as libertarians, we have no problem standing up for beliefs that we believe in, no matter how right or wrong they might seem to to Democrats and Republicans. So it just so happens that this stance this time is going to propel me ahead of the other two candidates. So
it's incredible. Now you mentioned that you had two bills there in Oklahoma. Did you want to briefly talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was Senate Bill 612, which essentially what it did was it made it a felony to conduct a abortion, so like a doctor or anything like that. I believe it's up to 10 years and $100,000 of a fine. And then the newest one, which is Senate Bill 1503, made it illegal to have an abortion past 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it also had the same snitch law written into it that Texas had, which basically gives $10,000 to individuals that snitch on somebody else that's performing abortions. So it's a really unfortunate thing, especially considering the average amount of weeks along that a woman is before she even finds out that she's pregnant is about 5.5 weeks. And then due to, in a lot of states, and here as well, there's a lot of built-in things where you can't get an abortion the same day that you go to the clinic, or, you have to go through certain things before you're even allowed to have an abortion. So you're basically forcing it out of even possibility, even if you do find out, beforehand. So there's a lot of, crazy things about it. And I wish that things were as easy as people like to say it is, which is just, oh, you're murdering babies, or oh, this, but it is not a black and white issue. There's so much gray, which is why I, as a personally pro-life individual, believe that the government needs to stay out of it, because there's too much gray areas in between.
Yeah, definitely. And it looks like for both of those bills, What it encourages is for, if you're wealthy enough, you just leave the state, you go get it done, and you're fine. If you're a person lower in the income scale or don't have the ability, well, it sucks to suck, and no doctor's going to want to, perform these abortions, and
Yeah, we're penalizing the poor like usual.
exactly. And for the 6 week thing, I mean, I don't want to get into my wife's personal health too much, but after her heart surgery, her schedule fluctuates quite a bit. And she's gone 7 weeks before, so we wouldn't have even had a sign there to say, hey, you're pregnant. Thankfully, we haven't been put into that circumstance, but I'm sure that we're not just an isolated case where there are plenty of women out there that have irregular cycles, to where by the time that they have confirmation that they're pregnant, they're already beyond that 6 week ban. So it feels almost like from the outside, at least, that people are just would rather win on the legislative side rather than actually care. The kind of like what you were saying, it's not just a black and white thing. There's so many different details that legislators and lawmakers just ignore entirely.
Well, not only that, but if you think about it, I feel like a lot of the pro-life materials that I'm seeing out there, or arguments, really paint women who get abortions out to be these floozies that are just running around having unprotected sex. And that's not the case. Actually, there's always things that we hear, but I like to dig in and be like, okay, what's really the statistic on that?
Yes.
And I pulled up some stuff about how like 59% of women actually already have at least one child. 73% of the reasons of abortion are actually financial. It has nothing to do with the fact of, I'm just an unmarried person that had sex. These are women who already have children. They didn't want to have additional children because of the fact that they, they already know they can't afford it. And obviously, typically, it's the more conservative side that is against abortion, but they're also against welfare. So you're having these situations where you have women who can't afford to fly out of state to have abortions, who are already saying the reason they wanted to have an abortion is because they know they can't afford it. But by golly, if they keep their baby and they ask to be on welfare, you're shaming them for, why are you popping out all these kids when you know you can't afford it? And then on top of that, we fail to recognize or realize that birth control and getting a tubal ligation and stuff is not as easy to get as we like to proclaim it is. For myself, even, within the state of Oklahoma, these Christian hospitals, they do not allow tubal ligations. So whenever I had my fourth child and I wanted to have a tubal done, I couldn't even have it during my C-section. I had to have a completely separate appointment to go in and outpatient surgery just to have a tubal. So it's like, hey, so we're going to fault you for not wanting to have a pregnancy, but all these things that you can do as a woman to prevent pregnancy, we're going to either make it very difficult for you to do, or we're going to make it to where your husband has to sign off on it, or we're going to tell you, no, we're not going to do it because you don't have any children yet, and you might change your mind. And then even when it comes to birth control, you can't just go to a pharmacy and buy birth control like men can buy condoms. It doesn't work that way. It's so much more complicated, than we're making it out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point of, you have to get your husband's permission. You have to get a permission slip. Oh, daddy, can I please have my my tubes tied? It's just like that's not, we are working, there's so much of the system that works against everybody, against men and women in this country, from being able to make decisions for their own life. And then when circumstances arise where you have married women who are having consensual sex with their husbands, protected sex, and doing all the right things, and they're still, they still accidentally have a kid, and they're not, just as you said, they don't have the financial means to take care of them. Now they're stuck in this pit where they get looked down upon for not being able to afford their lifestyle, or they get looked down upon for trying to make a financial decision of not having a kid. And so it's only a lose-lose situation for so many people that I guess it should be expected with kind of the just kind of the views that political people typically have of the rest of the population. If you don't live the life the way that I say that you do, then you're just destined to mess up, and you know, no sympathy, no care, no response at all. And go ahead.
Even with that, you know, another argument is we hear is, oh, well, you can always put the child up for, you know, adoption. Well, the issues with that is, number one, it's a lot harder if you're an individual that didn't want to have a child. Once you are actually carrying out a pregnancy, now you are visibly pregnant to your family members, to other, you know, people in society, and the negative effects of being a person that puts up their child for adoption is almost as bad as is getting an abortion, to be honest with you. And then especially when you go into terms of, like, I can only mostly speak to my state, and I like to remind people as well, you know, I have a blended family of my own. I birthed 4 kids. I have 2 stepsons. I would be willing to bet I probably spend more volunteer hours per week in the realm of children than any other politician that I know of in my state. I was recognized last year for my service to children, you know, by winning the Judge Nan Patton Award. So I spend a ton of time dealing with children who are in a situation where they've been removed from homes and stuff like that. And to see the amount of children currently, without having a strict abortion bans, that are not being adopted, you know, are sitting in the foster care system, which I would like to remind everybody that 48% of children who exit out of the foster system say they have been either physically or sexually abused. Okay. So we have these situations. And then on top of that, you know, we're not even talking about the fact that these bills don't even cover when there's something medically wrong with the baby. You know, like, let's say that a child is going to be, you know, severely mentally handicapped and, you know, not be able to live a normal life. A normal pregnancy would allow for a woman to have tests done and then make that determination. And if they know that, you know, it takes a special person to be a parent to a severely special needs child, and not having that ability to abort that pregnancy, you're going to force them to carry out a pregnancy that they are going to put that child up for adoption that nobody will adopt, because nobody wants to adopt children with disabilities. Right now, any given day, you know, we are at a negative of 75 homes that are needed, homes, not children, homes that are needed for fostering special needs children. And whenever it comes to adopting special needs children, that doesn't happen, you know, and, you know, the expenses around it. So if we're talking about 73% of people are choosing abortion because they can't afford, you know, I pulled some numbers, and in the state of Oklahoma, on average, we had about 4,780 abortions. Okay. So if we take 73% of those and say that, you know, those people, it was for financial reasons, that's 3,489 additional people that could essentially be on welfare. So, you know, if you take into the average cost of welfare in our state for a child, that totals up to almost $67 million additional that taxpayers are going to have to pay to fund children if they even stay at the home. But let's talk about abuse. Even in the state of Oklahoma, child abuse is the highest than any other state in the United States. So we're going to take these people who didn't want to have children, force them to have children. And so either they're going to end up in the system, they're going to end up abused, or they're going to end up waiting for homes where there's not enough people to adopt them. So it's a lose, 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 lose situation.
Yes. And you mentioned the adoption, just the mindset. So I was adopted before birth. I am one of the fortunate kids out there. So through my birth mother, was married to a man, they separated for a little bit. She got pregnant and then went back to her husband, and he said, it's not my kid, I'm not going to raise them. So she had the option of either A, abort me, or B, put me up for adoption. Thankfully, her sister came along, and her and her husband adopted me, and so that's my mother and father. I am incredibly lucky for that. You know, and this isn't to say like abortion is the wrong thing. It's just saying that was what the path forward was. I am incredibly fortunate for the path that was given to me by having somebody adopt me before birth. If that wasn't the circumstance, that, you know, how long would I have been in you know, going from home to home. How long would it have been until I was adopted? And thankfully, other than maybe just being a libertarian, I'm normal otherwise. So there's a large struggle there to begin with, and my camera doesn't even want to focus on me anymore. But there's a large struggle there. And listening to my birth mother, now that I learned who she was and I've built a relationship with her, the mindset of somebody who gives their kid up for adoption is just as difficult as somebody who goes through abortion. These things are not something that come lightly for anybody. She saw me about 8 months after I was born, and it was so incredibly hard for her to give me up after then. These are decisions that shouldn't be made lightly, and they aren't, but these are not ones that should be made a decision by a pen of a legislator that has never cared about you, never known your name or anything about your life. These are things that have to come down to individual choices.
Absolutely. And, not only in regards to that, yeah, you're a fuzzy camera. super, super distracting. But that's, I guess, one of the things that just kind of angers me in general is that, it really appears that we only care about the thought of helping children. It's so easy to wave your, mostly, I'll say, Republican flag and say, oh, I'm here to save the babies, or hey, you're pro-choice, so you're all about murdering babies. When in all actuality, with the amount of child trafficking we have in our state, with it being a major cross section with 35 and 40, with the fact that we're number one in domestic violence and child abuse and all of these things, that just tells me no, we're not really for the children. We're just for controlling women's bodies. Yes. And liking to pretend like we care about the children, because if it was really about caring for the children, then we wouldn't have our current live breathing children in the predicaments that we're putting them in right now, with our failing criminal justice system, where most of their parents are imprisoned for ridiculous, cannabis charges. And, I could go on for days in that regard. You know how passionate I am about criminal justice reform. And it just shows us, at least in our state, that we are really not for the child. We need to address the situation with, the people that we can actively affect on a day-to-day basis before we try worrying about, the personal private decisions that women should be able to make between them and their doctors on what is best for their personal situation. Because at the end of the day, it's forced pregnancy. It's easy for people to say, because it is mostly men, no offense to you, that have really strong opinions about, abortion and life, but they're not, it's easy for them to run off and have a pack of cigarettes and then never come back. Women are physically carrying the baby. It physically changes your body. And if something were to ever happen, I have 2 daughters, both of them have high functioning autism. If one of them were to be raped and they wanted to have that choice to not have to be forced to permanently change their body, by carrying a baby that they are not going to be in a position to take care of, I'm not going to force them on that, just because I feel from a morality standpoint that, I have a better knowledge of what they should do with their life or their bodies than they should. And, so it's not just standing up for me, even though I, like I said, my tubes are tied. I have no skin in the game myself, because, with the, short of a miracle, I don't have to be worried about getting pregnant again. But I am absolutely going to fight for that right to have that decision for all the other women and young ladies and children out there.
And I think it's also important that while we talk about this choice, as this Supreme Court, as the opinion was leaked, or the draft of the opinion at least was leaked, the idea that we go to federalism and have all 50 states be able to make their own case as to how it goes. There will be states where this is a majorly criminal activity. It's going to be interesting to see the way that plays out, where miscarriages are something that, you have people that are visibly pregnant and then they miscarriage. Those are going to come under criminal scrutiny. And I you and I, the last time I had you on, we were talking about the death penalty, and we were talking about people's lives being destroyed, like actually being ended innocently. And we're going to see that when it comes to a woman now. And when you have a section or a state that implements this, and a woman has an innocent miscarriage, because let's face it, a fetus inside the belly is still an incredibly susceptible thing. It's incredibly vulnerable. There's so many things that can happen, that we will see more lives get destroyed because people felt a certain way morally, rather than feeling with compassion and trying to help build up our communities. There's so many things that we could be doing.
Absolutely. Well, I've had two miscarriages myself. I had one at 7 weeks, but then I had one at almost 6 months. I had already knew I was having a boy. His name was Owen, and it was a super unfortunate thing where the umbilical cord got wrapped around his neck. And I felt something was wrong. I went into the emergency room here at Integris, and there was no more heartbeat. Okay, and I had to do a DNC. So technically, I guess you could say I have had to have an abortion, because that is how you have to handle those miscarriages. Is I had to have a DNC in order to pass the child. And how, with as traumatic as that was for me then, imagine how traumatic it would be if that was now, wherein there would be an opportunity for someone to challenge me on whether I really lost my baby or if I just secretly had an abortion, and how much more traumatizing that would be for a woman to have to prove that they had a miscarriage, as opposed to just not having it be an issue at all. Like, I can't imagine if I would have had to have gone through that on top of the fact of miscarrying a child that far along.
Yeah, and for people who haven't been in that, I mean, that's gruesome for me, because I've had plenty of friends and that have been through that. But if somehow somebody hasn't, I mean, just imagine when you lost a loved one, somebody who was walking around, and you lost that loved one, and while you're still grieving, you had an officer walk up to you and be like, "Why'd you do it?" It's traumatizing. The grieving stage is such a hard part of life, just for so many people, and then to have a baby or a fetus or whatever we want to call it at the time, to have a lost one, this isn't an opportunity for us to say, now you need to have the government step in. And I think that one of the other important things that when we talk about this, and this is where it gets really boring, is the idea that there are states that are looking at making life legally at conception or at 6 weeks or whatever that point is. And it makes a very interesting thing, because of the way that the laws are already structured, that at that point of once it's life, you basically have to have this documented. If that's why we have the certificate of death and the certificate of birth, the certificate of death or dead birth or stillborn, is now you're literally open up this can of worms for more and more people to have the state intervene. And it hurts my soul to see good libertarians on so many issues stand there and say, no, we need to codify this as this is the point of life, and we need to make it a legal matter. I just look at how the state has handled so many of our other issues. I don't see how welcoming them into another aspect of our most personal and loving parts of our lives, how that's going to make any of this better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it comes down to a personal moral issue. It really does. And whenever, just like how they say it's really impossible to argue about religion in general, because it's something that you believe, right? So, we could go blue in the face, about our different beliefs, because there's no, nothing tangible that we can like really argue with. It's about our faith. And that's why this abortion topic is so hot to people, because it is highly moral based, but we cannot make laws and legislation based off of morality and them being the morality police. We just can't do it, because then where are we going to draw the line, right? There's so many other things that, and we fail to remember, because, maybe it's because of the age that some of us were at that time, but we tried it. We made abortion illegal, and what we did was the mortality rate of women went through the roof. That's why this whole thing happened in the first place, is because just like we see with the war on drugs, prohibition doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't. I am all for less unplanned pregnancies. I am all for less abortions, but this is not the way to fix it. It's not. All we're doing is we are disproportionately targeting those who are low income. And if we really, really cared about there being less frequent unplanned pregnancies, we would address some of these issues that cause these problems about the, not being able to have female sterilization that we request, and not having all these hoops that we have to jump through, and making birth control more accessible, and all of these things that we kind of mentioned earlier. If we really cared about women and cared about babies, let's not, let's actually fix the root of the problem, not focus on, the end result, so to speak. And, I'm really, really hoping that, some things change legislatively, because this is going to be a really serious backlash. And, essentially, we feel like it's almost a war against women. And, it's pretty unfortunate that's happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's kind of is the winning issue on this is that if you look at a national polling of how people view abortions, we hear from the fringe groups, we hear from the fringe pro-choice, and we hear from the fringe pro-life, but there are so many Americans out there that kind of see this more for what it is, and they say, look, it's not my decision, it shouldn't be my decision. And I think that, as long as we're standing out here saying, people need to be able to live their lives and make the best decisions for themselves. They may make a decision that they don't like that leads to another decision that they don't like, but we need to be there to help them. And to your point about, we got to go to the root and we got to actually solve some of these issues. A lot of people think that as soon as you prohibit the abortions, that suddenly all these problems are going away. And as you eloquently put out, we're still going to have issues in the foster care system. Those are going to get exacerbated. We're still going to have issues in the abortion or in the adoption realm. Kids are not going to be getting picked up, but they're going to be over flooded. There's going to be more needy people, and plugging back into the criminal justice system. Kids that are in and out of foster homes are much more likely to be going into the prison system because they don't have a structured life, a structured family around them. Without a nucleus family, you're more likely to have that. And so there's so many aspects that we see where Republicans and Democrats typically try to nitpick at society and at the culture. And so many of these things are so interwoven with one another. And it's like, why don't we actually look at the root of some of these problems and actually try to address them, right? Republicans clearly have won out in Oklahoma, and they think that the death penalty is the way to stop all the crime. But, as you were talking about the last time you were on here, clearly that's not it. And you're getting it wrong more often than you're getting it wrong enough to where it's a major concern.
Right. Well, and one thing that you brought up a second ago that I'm actually going to segue back into when you were talking about we usually hear from the fringe groups, right? Is that one thing that really irked me about Stitt signing this last bill was that he said, I'm speaking for all 4 million Oklahomans by signing this 6-week, bill. But Amber Integrated, which is a group that does political polling here, just in December did political polling asking that if Roe versus Wade was overturned, do Oklahomans think that there should be a complete ban on abortion? And even within the Republican Party, it wasn't over 50%. There was 48% that said yes. The rest either said no or undecided. And it was in some groups, 70 and 60% saying no, no, no. Like, so no, I'm sorry, but a majority of us do not want a total ban on abortion. Do most of us think that abortion should be used as like just a come and go type of birth control? No, but we understand that there are too many gray areas, that it shouldn't be up to you and I to decide what is a good reason to have an abortion and what a good reason isn't. It's between the woman and their healthcare provider, especially considering the issue with like the late term abortions. 85% of abortions are done before 13 weeks, so in the first trimester. And the only ones that are really done after that are when the mother's health is in danger. So we are already, women don't want to have an abortion after they already look like they're pregnant. They are already trying to get in as quickly as possible to take care of the situation. Granted, we've created all these rules, like I said, and I also want to mention too, we as libertarians, we do not believe in federal funded abortions. We don't believe in Planned Parenthood. We don't believe in any of those. We do think that it should be private entities and stuff that handle these. So we aren't even saying that you as taxpayers should have to put a dime on it, okay? Because there are nonprofits still take care of that, okay? So we will say that we are against the federal funding of these programs, but they should be allowed and they should not be illegal.
Yeah, and I put out a tweet, I think it was last week when this was all blowing up, but it was like, funding is certainly a concern for libertarians. Not a single taxpayer penny should go to either abortion providers or their counterpart companies, so that way it can get slushed over and enable these things. But in order to try to help that, of course, the voluntary donations, those should all become tax credits, just straight off the top. Like, to allow for people the opportunity that they can fund what they believe in to help people get affordable healthcare. When it comes to these matters or other forms of healthcare, it doesn't really matter to me. I think that, moving it in the way of allowing the people to speak with their dollars on what is needed for society, rather than having government just be able to slosh a bunch of money into different programs and allow for it to go wherever it may, actually give us the opportunity. This is going to handle a lot of that revenue issue that people that are adamant about pro-choice, that almost want you to scream from the rooftops about it. This will help at least subsidize some of that, because we've seen in the past, and I remember there was I don't remember what the actress name was, but she made large donations to Planned Parenthood under Mike Pence's name, and they made it very public. And I was like, you're proving that you don't need the tax money. You guys just continue to fund what you guys want, and we'll be all right. So
absolutely, if it's something that's important to somebody, there's going to be a way to fund it. We don't need the government to fund those things. And so when it comes down to it, you don't have to pay a single one of your tax dollars to support an abortion from somebody else. And if you don't want to have an abortion, don't have one. And, at least allow women the right to choose when they want to become a mother and when they don't. The argument, well, when you have sex, that's just a risk that you take, that's, it's not the 40s or the 20s or anything like that anymore. It's 2022. Let's just be realistic.
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet that most people I know did not save themselves till marriage. Okay. Accidents happen, but, most of the time when women are having these abortions, a lot of the ones that I know who have, which isn't very many, because it isn't, that's the thing. It's not like women are just having abortions all over the place. These are situations where they were on birth control and it failed, different situations arose themselves. And I will say that happens all of the time. Of my 4 children, 2 of them are birth control babies. I will tell you that. But mistakes happen. And we have to allow women to choose what physically happens to their bodies and what doesn't.
Yeah, especially when you look at what childbirth does to a woman's body. I mean, it's not just a matter of like just looking at, and I don't want to be I don't want to be gruesome with it. It's not just a matter of like the vagina just like shrink it back and then you're suddenly good. Like your teeth are ultimately weakened. Like this affects the entire woman's body and how it's structured and how it repairs and everything else. Multiple childbirth is incredibly difficult. It's considered a major trauma on the woman's body. So if a woman has already been through a lot, my wife, and I don't like bringing up her medical health. We had my daughter. A month later, she had heart surgery. A month later, she had open heart surgery. Her body could barely handle all 3 of those, and having the discussion around her being able to handle just giving birth, we do all the things to make sure that we don't, but this puts her at a much higher risk. And so am I just not supposed to allow to have intercourse with my own wife? Is that the standard society would like for me to have? Because I'll be honest, like it's a part of the marriage, like we
Right.
enjoy that time.
Right, exactly. And, and I'm sorry, the argument that, sex is only for procreation. Like, I hate that argument. And I hate to, I'm sorry if anybody's children are in the room listening to this, but we're grown adults. And, I believe in having, straightforward conversations about things. But if sex was made for purely procreation, then it wouldn't be enjoyable. It wouldn't. I'm sorry. So, and there has been speak of sex from a recreational standpoint, even as much as in the Bible. So it is not just out there for procreation. I'm sorry. And yes, that is a side effect of having sex, is becoming pregnant, but that shouldn't mean that women are forced into that. And there was a story actually of that I had heard, because obviously on Facebook, because this is such a thing, everybody's sharing their personal stories with abortion. And we as women are the ones that have to sacrifice when these things happen. There was a story of a young lady and her boyfriend that are college students. They're both college athletes. And she became pregnant, if she would have kept the pregnancy, she would have had to have quit her college sports career. Okay. Would the father have had to have done that? No, father's fine. Father's still living life just how, the way that he was. Should we have required him to, because she has to no longer play college sports because she has to physically carry the baby, that as a sympathy that he should have to also quit college sports because he doesn't have those same responsibilities as the mom? No, of course, that's ridiculous. But, there are, women are affected in such a different way than the man is in this situation. And that's just the way it is. And I know that it's frustrating to people that, we as women hold all the cards, but we're also the ones that have to hold all the risk. And,
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
It is one of those struggles, and all too often I think it's so bad when people downplay just how much of a difference there is when it comes to the genders in this. And I also think that I'm kind of also frustrated because there is that section of people that say that men should have absolutely no say in this discussion at all. And I'm like, 1973, when Roe versus Wade was passed, it was passed by an all male SCOTUS. But like, the good ideas are good ideas, and we have to look at that. But that doesn't mean that, we have to say that there's equal risk in this, just as you had pointed out, because there is a lot more at stake when it comes to a woman being pregnant versus a man who pumped and dumped effectively. He gets to continue on with his life, and right. he can do whatever. And the court systems, we know how broken the court system is, and how that's that's a whole nother conversation of child support or child custody battles, and et cetera. But I think that really brings in a lot more of the nuance of this conversation of how is it that somebody is going to tell somebody else what kind of a life that they have to live. Because you can say for 9 months, I get to control you, you can't abort a child, but for the next 18 years, 20 years, and probably looking like 30 years coming soon based on the economy, you're stuck with these children. So your entire life, I've determined that you have to suffer for the next 30 years through these circumstances, and hopefully you're going to get it right, or I'm going to criticize you even further. We have to, I think that there needs to be a lot more compassion when it comes to this conversation, and all too often it's just blanketed, I have an idea and therefore my idea is good. And at the end of the day, the best thing that we can do is just listen to the people that are in these circumstances and say, I really don't know. I don't know how.
We had a situation of a woman here in Oklahoma. So, and this is the kind of things that I think that we'll continue to see. So, two-part situations. One is the story of, there was a woman who had a miscarriage, but because she had drugs in her system, they decided to go ahead and charge her with murder. So that's something that's happening right now. So she had a miscarriage, but they believed it was due to the fact that she was on drugs. So that is what she's currently being charged for, to my understanding. It could be manslaughter. I might be mixing the two, but she does have charges being pending for that. So there's situations like that we're going to see happen a lot more. Okay. And then on top of that, we have situation where we do have women who have like mental health issues, where they're on medications for schizophrenia or things like that, to where if they are not on those medications, okay, then they are at a severe risk to not only themselves but others. But you also cannot take those medications safely while pregnant. So are we going to force them to then get off of their meds and become unsafe so that way they can give birth to a child? Or are they going to continue to take these medications and hope that it doesn't affect the baby, but by golly, if it does, then we're going to hold you accountable for that too. So there's, again, so many gray areas that are going to pop up. So we can't dictate yes or no. So we need to allow it and allow the individual choices that the women make, that be between them, their doctor, and if, and their God, if it is a situation where it's a morality thing for you.
Yeah. And the old saying of safe, legal, and rare, I think that the important thing is that we try to find ways to make it more rare when possible. We try to make it easier for people, and we don't criticize those who make these incredibly hard decisions. We've covered a lot of those circumstances where it's not easy on these people at all. And I think it's also important to note, and this is definitely an outlier for a lot of people, but there are people that are basically at the point of giving birth before they even realize they're pregnant. because of the birth control that they're on. They don't have periods, so they don't have like a normal cycle, but they get pregnant and they don't realize it. As I said, this is a complete outlier, but now you have people in circumstances where now they're suddenly a parent, and the shock that they go through. Now, of course, when you don't let people have abortions, they get the gradual buildup of that shock of, I have to live for the next 18 years, 20 years with a child and figure out my life and get things together. It's not so easy when it's a 16-year-old. It's not so easy, as a 16-year-old girl, if you're having consensual sex with another 16-year-old and you get pregnant, the idea that you're going to damn her schooling, she can't finish school, because now she's got a kid and trying to juggle that. She's not going to be able to have a fulfilling career. Not many people are going to be attracted to her. And so she's going to struggle so severely that the opportunity has to be given for her, or whatever circumstances she's in, to be able to make the best decision for her life going forward. Yeah, I'm probably repeating myself way too much on this. But
I will say with that. Yeah, no, I will say with that. Okay. Obviously, there are so many fantastic success stories of women who chose to keep their babies, right? Of teenage moms that ended up, doing fantastic and raising these fantastic children. By no means are we saying that young ladies are not fully capable and able, to, keep their children and be fantastic mothers. But the point is, though, they should be able to make that choice for themselves if they do feel like they are strong enough to do it or not, because we're seeing people that are in their late 20s having children that we should probably second guess whether or not they should have had children or not, so it's
yeah,
it's a situation where we're not saying all young ladies aren't capable. And yes, we do know there are some women who have been raped that decided to keep their babies, and we do know that there's some women that decided to keep their babies, and that's amazing.
yes.
I love my children. I love being pregnant. I would, I don't think that there would ever be a reason where I would ever personally have an abortion, no matter if, something happened to my husband or anything. Like, I would probably, because I love my children so much. But I'm not all women, and all
Yeah.
women are not going to, have situations or react to the situations the same way. I personally, was raped when I was 12 years old. And thankfully, I did not have very much trauma from it. I for whatever reason, like I went through a period of time, but I'm able to talk about it. I don't get triggered. And I use it as a really great example about how we're not having certain conversations with our children. And that's something that, I could do a whole podcast over, about how we don't prepare our children, our young ladies, for certain things the way we should. But I know women who have been raped around the same age that still have nightmares to this day. So, I mean, every single situation affects people very differently, and you can't make a decision for that person based off of how you feel or how you would handle it, because you are not that person and they are not you. We have to let people make the decisions that they know are best for them and their family.
Yeah, everyone's an individual. You don't know like where they came from, how they got where they are, how they're going to respond, how they've responded to other things. Blanketed statements don't work. And with the society stacking the decks against everybody in our societies, and of course on the show we've covered how hard it is to start up a small business. We've talked about the criminal justice system being stacked against certain demographics and certain populations. We've talked about just the education system being an absolute failure in the public side. There's so many things out there that you don't get to force people into a shitty situation because you yourself was in a shitty situation. Just say, I support you regardless of which way you choose. It's amazing when you have success stories. It's heartbreaking to see people fail, and eventually the empathy has got to win out in the day, and it's incredibly important. This has been such an incredible conversation. There's been no one screaming in the comment section. I've been learning so much from you. We're coming up about
I'm surprised. I really expected there to at least be a couple people that are like, you just love killing babies, or stuff like that. When it comes down to, it's like, guys, it's all out of love. You know what I mean? Like, if you're on both sides, we just either, it's just a matter of whether you have an outward love more for the women that are having to go through these issues or for those unborn babies. I really feel in my heart that when some of these things are done, I do think it happens with the best of intentions, but we just don't really think through all the things it affects and really think through, you know, how doing one thing negatively impacts so many other things because you just don't understand it the same way somebody else's does.
Yeah.
So
And I think that it's a really important note there of like you're doing this with good intentions, because people are, imagine being in a circumstance that you're not comfortable where you are in your life, and then finding out you're pregnant. People are not making this lightly, as we said. They're trying to make the best decision for themselves, and they're trying with the best intentions, and all that they don't need to see you on Facebook, shouting them down or shouting other people down who've had abortions. If you want to build connections, if you want to build that compassion, that empathy with people around you, you have to be welcoming for people to make decisions that maybe you wouldn't make yourself, but you're going to support them through that. And so I want to thank you so much, Natalie, for coming on. I want to give you the last couple of minutes, give you about 5 minutes or so to plug everywhere that we can find you, anything that you got coming up, and of course give you last words on this.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Spike and I, we've been playing tag where he had something come up and then I had something come up and then he had something come up. And so having the ability to talk about this while it's still so relevant and fresh on everybody's minds, I think is really important. When it comes to myself, for anybody that is interested in all of my stances outside of abortion, you can visit my website, which is electnataliebruno.com. On there, it'll have my issues. You can volunteer. You don't even have to be in the state of Oklahoma to help my campaign. Believe me when I say there are many things that you can do, even if you're in South Carolina or Maine or anything like that. There is a job for you here. This has been so far a fantastic libertarian campaign. My ultimate goal is obviously to win. But if by some crazy chance I don't, I do expect to pull some of the best numbers that a libertarian has ran. So, having the opportunity for people to come and join me and be part of that, I'd be really fortunate to have any extra people that I can. I also have Facebook, which is at Natalie Bruno LP. I'm on Twitter at Natalie Bruno. I'm also on Clubhouse, TikTok, Instagram, all of the things. So come find me. And then if you have any additional questions, or if you want my, stance on, specific verticals within this issue, reach out to me. I am not one of those candidates that give political answers where I don't really tell you my stance on an issue. I just dance around it. Even if it's a hard topic like tonight, or even if it is something that I don't think is going to be the most popular stance, I'm going to tell you because I would much rather voters know exactly where I stand than to allow the media or other people to guess based off of, the political affiliation that I have. So thank you so much for having me on and talking about this very passionate, issue that we are all facing right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and I am so excited. Everything I've looked at and seen from you is just, it's immaculate. It's perfect. I'm so excited to see you actually become the first governor elected as a libertarian. This is coming. So everyone, please do go to elect Natalie Bruno. I did spell it correct. electnataliebruno.com. Show her some support, show her some love, ask her questions. See if you can get her to post publicly about the questions you ask. Get her to get her stances out there, encourage her, let her know what's on your mind so that she can be the best candidate that she can be, and that's only through your support. So please get out there and help her out. My endorsement means nothing, but I would endorse you for anything that you're running for. You have a thumb this time. They don't know that joke.
That's why I didn't do it over here. See?
Oh, the ghost thumb. But thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing more success from you and everything else, and I'm looking forward to having you back on.
Thank you. Have a good night and a good weekend.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
All right, what an incredible conversation that was. I'm so excited every time I get to talk to Natalie. She is, as she said, she's incredibly approachable. You can ask her about anything. She will be there. She'll give you those answers, and she's going to take care of Oklahoma. So make sure you guys get out there. You support her. If you're in Oklahoma, go support her. Go canvass for her. Go help her. Make sure that she is the next governor of Oklahoma. If you're outside the state, donations are available. Go ahead. Just make sure you're not violating FEC laws by the contributions that you're trying to send her. But make sure you're following those. But get over there to electnataliebruno.com. But as for the conversation tonight, I mean, this is the nuance. This is the thing, right? We both come from the pro-life side on this conversation, but we understand that there has to be compassion. There has to be empathy. We have to look at the circumstances and understand that there's too much volatility. There's too many different aspects, too many gears shifting around for us to be able to make a one size fits all. This doesn't work in education. This doesn't work in healthcare. This doesn't work in the criminal justice system. So why would it work in the abortion sector? So incredible conversation tonight. I am invigorated to continue pushing out there and talking about this. But the show's only an hour long, so I want to thank you guys all for being a part of tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation. I see a lot of you guys joining in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for the support there, and love you guys, appreciate you guys all. But if you guys want to tune in next week, next Tuesday night, Muddy Waters of Freedom with Spike and Matt as they traverse the current events. It'll be a great show, of course. Wednesday night, and maybe Natalie's coming back for another good conversation with Spike Cohen on My Fellow Americans. Thursday night will be Matt Wright with the Writer's Block, and then Friday we'll be back here with Nate Banks talking about messaging and uniting with unlikely allies in order to be successful in our intentions and in our legislation. So a hell of a show lined up next week, all week long. Make sure you guys are tuning in. Thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure you guys head on over to anchor.fm/muddiedwater, subscribe to get a part of the exclusive group and get a part of all those good things. But with that, I hope you guys all have a great weekend. I'll see you guys all later. Be well, be good, and stay